Mark Chambers had always believed in patience. His mother had taught him that kindness and restraint could solve even the worst conflicts. But in all his years of dealing with difficult people, nothing compared to his neighbor, Karen Wilkins. Karen had made it her personal mission to make his life a nightmare. She watched him from her window like a hawk, waiting for any excuse to call the cops. When he had friends over, she claimed they were too loud, even though she blasted country music at full volume during her backyard barbecues. When he worked on his car in the driveway, she told the HOA he was bringing down the neighborhood. And the racial slurs, well, she made sure to keep those just quiet enough so no one else would hear. Mark had tried everything, filing reports, ignoring her, even moving his schedule around to avoid her usual complaints. But Karen was relentless. She thrived on his frustration, knowing she could get away with it. Then came the night that changed everything. Mark had just finished a long shift and was taking out the trash when Karen's voice rang through the air. 911. Yeah, there's a suspicious man sneaking around the neighborhood. I think he's casing houses. Mark froze, trash bag in hand. He turned to see Karen standing on her porch, phone pressed dramatically to her ear. He met her eyes, and instead of backing down, she smirked. She wanted him angry. She wanted him to react. The patrol car arrived within minutes, because, of course, Karen had them on speed dial. The officers, who had responded to her false alarms before, were already looking tired when they approached him. Mark let out a slow breath and forced a smile. Evening, officers. Let me guess, suspicious black man taking out his own trash. The officers exchanged a glance before sighing. Sorry, Mark. We have to check it out. He let them do their routine, answered their usual questions, and watched as they half-heartedly reprimanded Karen for wasting police resources. She giggled like a schoolgirl and waved them off. Mark stood there for a long moment after they left, gripping the trash can so hard his knuckles turned white. This wasn't going to stop. Not until Karen was forced to deal with real consequences. And for the first time, Mark decided he wasn't just going to sit back and take it. Revenge had never been Mark's style. He was a live and let live kind of guy. But after months of Karen's harassment, after watching her laugh in his face while the police let her off with a warning, something inside him shifted. That night, he sat on his couch, staring at his TV without really watching it. His mind raced with ideas, legal ones, petty ones, satisfying ones. Then, like a bolt of lightning, a memory hit him. He thought back to summer camp as a kid, when one of his friends had pulled a prank on their counselor using homemade sticky slime. Not the cheap store-bought kind, but the real deal, thick, glue-like, impossible to wash off without hours of scrubbing. His lips curled into a slow smile. Karen loved her backyard jacuzzi. Every weekend, she lounged in the bubbling water, sipping wine and pretending she owned the neighborhood. She bragged about it constantly, calling it her personal paradise. Mark grabbed his laptop and started searching. Within minutes, he found exactly what he needed: industrial-strength slime used for pranks and stunt shows. It was non-toxic, safe for the environment, but nearly impossible to remove from surfaces once it's set. Perfect. The next morning, he walked into a local specialty store, casually browsing the shelves before finding what he was looking for. A large, gallon-sized container labeled "Extreme Sticky Slime," for the ultimate prank. He picked it up, feeling its weight. The consistency inside was thick, heavier than regular slime. The moment it touched water, it would spread, congealing into a stubborn mess. At checkout, the cashier raised an eyebrow. Someone planning a prank? Mark chuckled. You could say that. As he drove home, he pictured Karen sinking into her jacuzzi, only to find herself covered in an inescapable web of green, sticky goo. He imagined the way she'd scream, the pure panic as she realized her precious hot tub was ruined. Oh, it was going to be beautiful. Mark had played the victim long enough. It was time for Karen to get a taste of what it felt like to be truly uncomfortable. The air was thick with humidity as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an orange glow over the neighborhood. Mark leaned casually against his fence, peeking through a small gap in the wooden slats. Just as he had predicted, Karen was exactly where she always was on Saturday nights, lounging in her overpriced backyard jacuzzi, glass of wine in one hand, phone in the other, her voice carrying over the fence. "And I'm telling you, Lydia, this neighborhood used to be so much better. But now. Ugh. You wouldn't believe the kind of people moving in." Mark rolled his eyes. Same script, different day. He exhaled slowly, his pulse steady. This was it. With careful precision, he hoisted the gallon-sized container of industrial-strength sticky slime over the fence. The moment had to be perfect, one swift motion, no hesitation. Karen was too busy running her mouth to notice the shadow above her. Then, pour. A thick, gelatinous stream of neon green goo cascaded into the bubbling water. For a moment, nothing happened. The churning jet spread the liquid, thinning it out. But within seconds, the jacuzzi's warm water activated the slime's unique polymer blend. The mixture thickened at an alarming rate, transforming into a sticky, viscous sludge Karen didn't notice at first. She leaned back, still talking, but as she swirled her wine glass, her fingers stuck to the rim. "What the?" She yanked her hand, but the slime clung stubbornly. Confused, she tried to lift herself from the water, but the goo had already coated her arms and torso, binding to her skin like an alien parasite. Then, the real panic set in. "Oh my God! What is this?" Her wine glass slipped from her grip and disappeared into the slime with a plop. Karen flailed, trying to push herself up, but the thick, expanding goop made every movement sluggish. She shrieked. "My jacuzzi! It's ruined!" Mark had to bite the inside of his cheek to keep from laughing too soon. Karen looked like a creature straight out of a horror movie, her arms coated in neon green sludge, her blonde hair tangled and dripping in sticky strands. Still, she struggled, the slime stretching like melted cheese as she fought against it. Then, finally, she managed to wrench herself free, slipping and nearly falling face-first onto the deck. The moment her feet hit the ground, her fury turned in one direction, straight at Mark. And Mark? He was already waiting with his phone out, recording every second. Karen stormed forward like a rabid beast, her once pale skin now stained a sickly green. Slime dripped from her arms in long, gooey strands, leaving splatters across her pristine patio as she moved. Her entire body trembled with fury. "You think this is funny?" she shrieked, eyes wide with rage. "You disgusting little." Mark finally let himself laugh, shaking his head. "I don't know, Karen, you tell me. You look good in green." That was it. That was the final push. With a guttural scream, Karen charged. Her bare feet slapped against the pavement as she crossed her yard, closing the distance between them at a terrifying speed. Slime still clung to her legs, making her movements jerky, almost unnatural. But she didn't care. She was coming for blood. Mark, however, was ready. His fingers hovered over his phone, and with a casual swipe, he switched screens. Dialing 911. Karen reached the fence just as the shrill sound of sirens cut through the air. Her wild expression faltered. She hesitated, panting, the goo still dripping from her limbs. Then she noticed it, the blue and red lights flashing at the end of the street, growing brighter with each passing second. Mark's smirk widened. "You might want to clean up before they get here." Karen's head whipped toward the approaching squad car. Her entire body tensed, her brain scrambling to form an excuse, a justification, anything. But she knew. She knew she had gone too far this time. Mark leaned casually against his fence, watching the realization settle into her eyes. "See, I figured something out, Karen," he said, voice calm and even. You love calling the cops on me, but you never thought I could call them on you. Karen turned back to him, slime-covered hands curling into fists. She opened her mouth, but before she could let out another screech. The officers stepped out of their vehicle. One of them, Officer Ramirez, sighed deeply. He had been to this house too many times before. Ms. Wilkins, he called out, looking unimpressed as he took in her slime-covered form. Mind explaining what's going on? Karen sputtered, pointing a shaking finger at Mark. He did this to me. He ruined my jacuzzi. Ramirez held up a hand. And why exactly were you charging at him like a linebacker? Karen's lips parted, but no words came out. She was caught. Mark took a slow step forward, flipping his phone screen around to show the officers. I've got months of her harassment on video, he said smoothly. Racial slurs. False police reports. Tonight's meltdown. It's all here. Officer Ramirez looked at the phone, then at Karen, then back to the phone. His patience had clearly run out. Turn around, Ms. Wilkins, he said flatly. Hands behind your back. Karen's face twisted into something ugly. Wait, what? No. He's the problem. I was just. The cold metal of handcuffs snapped around her wrists. This is harassment. I'm the victim here, she howled as the officers led her toward the patrol car, her slime-covered arms glistening under the streetlights. Mark watched it all unfold, arms crossed over his chest. As Karen was shoved into the back seat, he let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. For the first time in months, he felt free. Karen Wilkins had always been the loudest voice in any room. But this time, her voice wasn't winning her any favors. As the officers stood before her, taking in the scene, the ruined jacuzzi, the neon green slime dripping from her skin, the way her blonde hair clung to her face in disgusting, sticky strands, she launched into another one of her signature tantrums. He did this to me, she screeched, pointing at Mark like a deranged game show contestant. This is vandalism. He. Officer Ramirez, looking more unimpressed than ever, held up a hand to silence her. Mark, he asked, turning toward him. Mark didn't flinch. With a calm, practiced motion, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small flash drive. He handed it over without hesitation. This has months of security footage, he said smoothly. False police reports. Racial harassment. Threats. Every time she's called the cops on me for existing. I made sure to save the best ones for you. For the first time that night, Karen's mouth snapped shut. One of the younger officers plugged the drive into a small tablet, scrolling through the clips. It didn't take long before their expressions hardened. The footage spoke for itself. There was Karen, standing on her porch, whispering racial slurs under her breath. There was Karen, faking distress while calling 911, claiming Mark was acting suspicious. There was Karen, laughing as police officers questioned him on his own property. Clip after clip after clip. Officer Ramirez sighed, shaking his head. Well, damn. The color drained from Karen's face, well, whatever color wasn't already covered in slime. This isn't what it looks like, she stammered, stepping forward, only to slip on a patch of goo and nearly faceplant onto the pavement. He's setting me up. He's manipulating the footage. Mark arched an eyebrow. Yeah. Then why does it match the 911 call records? That shut her up. Officer Ramirez exhaled deeply, then turned to his partner. Go ahead and read her rights. Karen's eyes bulged. Karen Wilkins, the younger officer began, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. You're under arrest for harassment, making false police reports, and disturbing the peace. The wail that came out of Karen's mouth was almost inhuman. No. No. You can't do this, she howled, struggling as the cold steel snapped around her wrists. Actually, we can, Officer Ramirez muttered, barely masking his boredom. I'm the victim here, she shrieked. I'm. Her voice was cut off by the sound of the squad car door slamming shut. For months, Karen had been the one calling the police, weaponizing the system against Mark. But now. Now she was the one sitting in the back seat, her slime-covered hands useless against the cuffs, her face twisted in disbelief. And this time, she wasn't going home in 10 minutes. Mark let out a breath, watching as the officers drove away, their red and blue lights flashing in the night. For the first time in a long time, the street felt quiet. Justice had finally arrived.